Greetings builders, Daniel here and welcome to another top 3 video where every week I choose a topic and show you my 3 favorite builds of it. Today's theme is for those who like a little heat. I'm talking about the fire builds, and if you wanna try any of those you can find links for POBs and complete guides in the video description. And if this video helps you, please leave a thumbs up to support the channel. Thank you very much and let's get into it! Let's start with a build that it's fire itself. The Righteous Fire Chieftain with the Marauder class. This is probably the easiest way to have such a strong presence. You just need to walk past the enemies and they will melt and explode without even touching you. To visit the pros of this build, I would start with how simple it is. Because of the Chieftain Ascendance, you only need to stack fire resistance to have all elemental resistance. Because of that, you can also easily cap your chaos resistance. Keeping on that topic, also because of the Chieftain Ascendance, you can also easily have 90% resistance to all elements, making you very tanky without much investment. Above all of that, Righteous Fire is a super fun and smooth build to play because you just run and shield shard your way through many maps per hour. Now to visit the cons, I'll start saying that this build doesn't have a big single target damage without a lot of investment. But don't worry, you'll be able to kill map bosses easily even on a low budget. This build is an amazing league starter and it's meant as a cheap and fast currency farmer. As for budget, this build is cheap, you can get it destroying early endgame maps with only around 70 chaos. To comfortably advance to yellow maps, I recommend investing around 120 chaos, and for easily completing your Atlas, you need to invest around 4 divines, mostly in your survivability. Don't forget that on PoEbuilds.net you can find a list with all the equipment that you need to buy for this build, with direct links for examples being sold by other players. You only need 2 mandatory unique items for this build. The first is the Rise of the Phoenix Shield that grants up to 200 life regeneration per second and most important, plus 5% to maximum fire resistance. Next, we also need the Cloak of Flames armor that grants 40% of the physical damage you take to be received as fire damage. This is great because we have 90% fire resistance. For clear speed, I'll give it 10 out of 10. You just need to run through the maps and enemies will die just because of your presence. It's super smooth and one of the best clear speed experiences you're going to have on PoE. The boss damage on the other hand is not great. I'll give it only 7 out of 10 because you need a lot of currency to scale single target damage, but as I mentioned before, this is meant as a map farmer and you can kill map bosses easily on a low budget. For this survivability, I'll give it 9 out of 10. Thanks to the Chieftain Ascendance you can get 90% of all elemental resistance and even easily get maximum chaos resistance, all of that combined with over 2000 life regeneration. I only took 1 point out because it needs more investment to be able to face tank physical bosses. Next we have a fire build that is super fast and can also chill and shock enemies. I'm talking about the Infernal Flicker Strike Ascendant with the Scion class. This build uses the unique sword Auto Sacrifice to sustain the frenzy charges needed for you to keep flickering, but that's not any Auto's flicker build. This one also chills and shocks enemies for a lot more damage, clear speed and survivability. To list the pros of this build, I would of course start with its clear speed. Flicker is just incredibly fast and super cool to play. This build also counts with an amazing boss damage and high survivability. Now to list the cons, the first thing that comes to my mind is that you're always very close to enemies, which is a vulnerable position. Another issue is that you have little control over your character, making it hard on bosses where you need to mind your position or attack the right enemy. As for budget, you can get it destroying early endgame maps with only around 90 chaos. To comfortably advance to yellow maps, you need to invest around 150 chaos, and for easily completing your Atlas, I recommend investing around 4 divines. We need 2 mandatory unique items for this build. The first and most important is the Auto Sacrifice sword that allows you to maintain your frenzy charges always up even while flickering. Next, we also need the Call of the Void ring that causes your attacks to chill and shatter enemies. This ring might be a little expensive during the first days of a new league, but don't worry, you'll be fine without it while waiting for the prices to drop. For clear speed, this build is surely a 10 out of 10. As any other flicker build, this one is also insanely fast, so fast that some players can even play without getting nauseous. The boss damage is great and deserves 9 out of 10. this build achieves high amounts of DPS capable of decimating even the big bosses in just seconds. Now for the survivability, I'll only give it 8 out of 10, even though this build still has almost 100,000 effective HP because of high armor, evasion and spell suppression. I had to take 2 points out because they're always very close to enemies. Finally, we have the Spin to Win Fire Cyclone Berserker with the Marauder class. This build converts 100% of Cyclone's damage into fire to clear endgame maps like an amazing flame tornado. To list the pros of this build, I would start with the clear speed. With Cyclone you never need to stop moving, and that spin to win feeling is just awesome. This build also has a great single target damage with not much investment. Now to list the cons, the main issue of this build is survivability. Even though this build has many defensive layers, it also needs to stay very close to enemies, which is a vulnerable position. And as a berserker you already take 10% increased damage. As for budget, you can get it destroying early endgame maps with only around 90 chaos. To comfortably advance to yellow maps you need to invest around 150 chaos, and for easily completing your atlas I recommend investing around 6 divines, otherwise your survivability won't be enough and you will end up dying a lot. You need 2 mandatory unique items for this build. The first one is the Gamahu's Flame Axe that already converts 60% of your physical damage to fire, grants 20% fire penetration and triggers Molten Burst on hits for a lot more single target damage. Next, we also need a Stampede Boots that guarantee that our movement speed is always 150% of its base. This is great because now we can replace the regular Cyclone with Cyclone of Tumult for a lot more damage and area of effect. For clear speed this build gets 9 out of 10. As mentioned before, Cyclone is an awesome skill that never stops moving. You just need to slide through the maps killing everything that gets near. The boss damage is amazing, deserves 10 out of 10. Now with Cyclone of Tumult we have a lot more attack speed to trigger Molten Burst many times and destroy even the biggest bosses in just a few seconds. The survivability on the other hand gets 7 out of 10. Even though this build has a great life pool, permanent fortify, high armor, high evasion and spell suppression, it's always in a vulnerable position, very close to enemies. That might be a little frustrating if you try high tier maps without investing in your survivability. And that's it for today guys, what did you think about those fire builds? Please don't forget to tell me your thoughts in the comments and leave a thumbs up to support the channel. I wish you guys an amazing day and don't forget to keep building!